Hello, my name is Joe Halfman, and I'm a Senior Solution Consultant with Fortens. This video will take a look at an email template manager built in K2, which makes it possible to create and manage email templates for any K2 application. Almost every K2 application sends emails. Common emails include notifications for task assignments, reminders for overdue tasks, and status updates. K2 provides support for sending emails in HTML format, which makes it easy to add context-specific data as well. This makes it possible to generate nicely styled email messages. A common requirement for a K2 application is to allow a non-developer or business user to customize the format of the emails, including identifying what data should be included. One approach to satisfy this requirement is to create a K2 user interface for managing a list of custom email templates, and then use K2's rich text control to define the format of the email. Also, tags can be inserted into the template. These tags on the back end use a SQL Store procedure to then dynamically generate the HTML for the email and incorporate the data by replacing the tags with the data. And this works pretty well for a single application, and the approach can be duplicated with other applications. However, the biggest weakness is that any changes to the source of the data and adding additional tags for inserting data fields requires changes to the K2 application. It is this weakness that inspired me to find a better way to manage the email templates and make it possible to modify the source of the data for the email. Let's take a look at the email template manager that has this functionality, and then we'll dive into the details of managing the email's data source. Here's the user interface that was built to manage these email templates. On the left-hand side, we have a list of the different applications in our system. In this example, I only have a few that I've actually specified, and you'll see one is called expense claim. These are just managed in a table, and it makes it possible then to design and manage your email templates for any of your applications in your environment. So let's go ahead and we'll create a template. The first thing we're going to do is we give it a name. So I'm going to call this the expense claim request. And the purpose of this email is once I've submitted a request, it'll just confirm the request that I've made. So you'll see we've identified the application as well as the name of the email template. Now here is where we specify the source of the data that we're going to pull into our email template. The first thing we see is a picker list here that allows me to select any smart object. In this case, I'm going to look for the expense claim details. Go ahead and find that one. I'll select it. So now what I've done is I've selected a specific smart object. In the method drop-down list, this has been set up so that it will give me any of the methods that are for read or list type. In this case, I have the get list and a load. So I'll go ahead and I'll use the simple load one. And then I'm going to specify the ID property. There is only one in this case, but either way, it's only going to show me the properties that are input type properties for the smart object. So I'll go ahead and select that. So now that I've selected my data source, now I can start building out my template and put the replacement tags in for each of the different fields that this smart object returns. Any of those fields are going to be automatically populated in this insert property drop-down list. Once I actually select one of the properties from the list, you'll see it says it's been copied to the clipboard. Indeed, that's what happens. So for example, now if I take and I will actually get rid of this description here, but I will show you that I've said expense claim submitted for my subject. I'll go ahead and paste now, and you'll see that it automatically put the description tag into my subject header. Now the body's a little more complicated, so I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I've got some HTML that I've already built out to illustrate this. And again, this is using and leveraging K2's rich text designer. So I could go down here and I'll select HTML, and I'll go ahead and paste the HTML I have in there. And you'll see it gives me a nice header, and I've got a formatted title here for expense claim, and then I built out the payee, description, date, and amount in the table. But you'll see I haven't put any data in there yet. Here's where I can go into my table here now, and I will go up to my drop-down list. I'll go ahead and select payee. Once again, it's going to be copied to the clipboard, so I can just paste that in there. And I'll do the same thing for the description again, and then the date. And you can see how easy it is for somebody to pretty much, without any issues, copy these tags and insert them into the template. And then also, because this is US dollar amount, I'll go ahead and I will put a $sign in front of this. Once again, because we are in the rich text editor, I can highlight any of these and I can bold them. So that's what I'm going to do. And there we go. There's our final email template, where you can see we have the placeholders or the tags for the data we want to insert. Now, where this becomes very beneficial now is that it makes it very easy to call out in a stored procedure, which we'll see in a little bit. Given the template name and an ID value, we can actually generate the email. And I actually put a test right into this application right here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now I'm just going to use test ID value 1 because I know there's a record with an ID of 1. And I'm going to go ahead and preview that. And you'll see it's taken the data from my first record, the payee being John Q. Public, description meals, and there's the date, and there's the amount. So it's easily able to replace our data tags and generate our email. Again, this is completely flexible and manageable, and you could add as many templates as you want, and it'll be by the name, as well show you shortly how we can easily then use a generic stored procedure to generate these email templates. Now, let's take a look at the design of this interface here so that we can see what we're using for the source for the Smart Object method and ID property controls. So here you see the design of the view that's used for the data source for our email template. So if we take a look at this picker control right here, and then look at the source for this picker control, you'll see we're using a smart object called Smart Object Info. That smart object can be found under the System, Management, and Smart Objects category that's standard with K2. Here we're using the list method, and the identifier is the GUID, and we're just displaying the name. After we've selected a smart object, we then populate the method drop-down list with the methods for that smart object. Once again, we're taking advantage of some built-in management functions. In this case, these are under the Smart Object Service functions under the same Smart Objects category under Systems and Management. The method we use is called getSmartObjectMethods, and we pass in the method name. We're using that as our value. And then the display is what we're showing then. And once again, this is filtered out by our selected smart object. And finally, we then filter further and we display the IDs that are associated with that smart object method. Once again, taking advantage of a built-in Smart Object Service function, this one called getSmartObjectMethod Properties. The value we're getting back is the property name, and then we're displaying the property name as well, along with the property type. Next, let's take a look at the smart object that we're going to use to return and generate that email. Here we see that smart object. It has some properties that are going to be very important when it comes to generating an email. The methods that we're going to use are actually, it's a single method, but we're binding several service objects to make this happen. Let's take a look at some of these. We only have 2 parameters being passed in. Again, we want to make this as simple and reusable as possible. So if we know the template name and the ID value of the underlying smart object data that we want to return with our email template, that's all we need. So the first thing that happens is we call into the email template config smart object and we read our configuration information. In there, we're going to get things like the smart object GUID ID value, the method name that we're using, as well as the ID property. We're then going to take those values and we're going to serialize some of them. Let's take a look real quick and see what we're doing there. So in order to make the next call, what we need to do is we need to specify the smart object name, and then we also need to specify the type of value we're passing in, which you'll see here we actually have hard-coded to be the input, and then the ID value itself is being passed in. This is now going to serialize parameters that we need for our next chained method here, which in this case is going to be an execute smart object. And once again, this is a built-in function that we can find under the system smart objects. So if we take a look at this one here, we need to have the GUID for the smart object, the method name, and then those input properties, which is basically going to be our ID and our value. What this is going to do is this is going to return us the results in a JSON format. We can then take the results from that JSON format and we're going to call a store procedure that's going to take advantage of SQL Server's JSON functionality to be able to parse it out, which I will show you shortly. The result is the store procedure is going to return our formatted email with the data replaced appropriately. Here's the SQL Store procedure that is the final piece to the implementation of using the smart object data source to generate the email by replacing the data tags in the template with the actual data. As you can see, we only have two parameters being passed in. Once again, we have the template name and then the serialized data that was returned from our execute smart object call that we made in our smart object. Let's take a look at that serialized data. It's a single record that's coming back that's serialized as JSON, and this is the way that the execute smart object method in K2 returns the data. So we have kind of a header here of the return properties, and then for each of the different properties that are being returned, we have a consistent description, display name, whether or not it's required, the ID, the property type, the type, and the value. What we're really going to be concerned with is the name and the value. We're going to use this to replace those tags within our template with the data. Let's see how we do that. One of the first things we're going to do is we're going to actually strip out that K2 smart object JSON wrapper. So the return properties that we have up front, as well as then the trailing delimiters that match up with the return properties with the beginning tags. Then what we're going to do is we're going to actually read from our template config table the configuration. We need to get the templates themselves, the body template and the subject template. Those are the templates that we saved using the email template manager. Next, we're going to declare a cursor, which is going to allow us to basically go through each of the different JSON properties that we have in our JSON using SQL Server's OpenJSON. This is very powerful, and I highly recommend you learn how to use this as it really allows you to leverage SQL Server to parse out JSON quite easily. As we spin through our cursor, all we have to do then is take our body template and our subject template and we replace. Again, because there's consistency, remember that we used the actual property names themselves in that drop-down list in the email template generator to replace the tags with the exact same property names. So all we're doing here is we're going to replace those placeholders, those tags, which consists of the curly brackets with the property name in between, with the property value. Once we've done that, we're done, and we just select back the body template and the object template with the data filled in as our return values. This concludes the video on the Email Template Manager. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and reach out to us if you want to learn more about how we can help you leverage your investment in the K2 platform. Thank you.